Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming out at such short notice. Let me just get right to the point. I need your help. We need your help.
On the night of December 5th, 2014, quiet Charlesville, Virginia was awakened by the sound of sirens. A house was burning on one of the residential streets. Thick smoke rose into the sky, and the smell of burning spread throughout the neighborhood. Firefighters arrived quickly, but it was already too late inside. 2 women were found in the bedroom, a mother and daughter. At first, it was thought that they had died of smoke inhalation, but soon experts revealed something that stunned the town. They had been killed before the fire started. These women were known to everyone. Robin Aldridge was an elementary school teacher, kind, gentle, and patient. Dozens of children called her their favorite teacher. Her daughter, 17-year-old Manny, was in high school, danced, and dreamed of going to art college. They were inseparable. 2 bright souls who always supported each other. When the police confirmed that the cause of death was severe head trauma, the city froze. This was no accident, no short circuit. This was murder, brutal, premeditated, cold. Who could have done this to 2 defenseless women sleeping in their own home? The next day, a wall of flowers, candles, and children's drawings grew in front of the burned-down house. Robin's students left notes. "You were our second mother. Thank you for your kindness." Manny's friends brought photographs, stuffed animals, dance shoes, anything that reminded them of her life. People stood in silence, unable to believe that the fire had taken those who had always been fire themselves. Alive, warm, kind. The police had been working since early morning. Traces of fuel, a broken window, and shoe prints were found at the scene of the fire. The house had become a crime scene, where every detail spoke of an intention to cover up the traces. The city was gripped by horror. Parents bolted their doors, neighbors checked their locks, and students walked home in groups. The question hung in the air. If this could happen here, among their own, where could they be safe? The deaths of Robin and Manny were not just a tragedy. They struck at the heart of the community. These 2 women embodied care and hope, and now their story has become a reminder that evil does not always come from outside. Sometimes it creeps in where trust lives. And while the ashes of their home were still smoldering, the city realized this was not just a fire. It was the beginning of one of the most terrifying stories ever to happen in Charlottesville. For Robin and Manny Aldridge, that day began quietly. It was Friday morning, December 5th, 2014. It was frosty, with a light fog and the smell of winter. In their house on Rugby Avenue, where it always smelled of coffee and cinnamon, everything was going as usual. Robin was getting ready for class, checking her notebooks, putting gifts for her students in her bag. The Christmas holidays were coming up. Manny was rushing to school, twirling in front of the mirror, fixing her hair. They talked as usual, about little things, plans, the weather. Robin smiled when her daughter kissed her goodbye. In the evening, they were going to watch a movie and decorate the house for the holidays. A box of garlands and Christmas tree decorations was already waiting by the door. At work, Robin arrived before everyone else, as usual. Her colleagues remembered that she looked happy, talking about her daughter, how she was working part-time at a dance school and dreaming of performing her own routine at the spring festival. Her eyes were shining. No one could have imagined that in a few hours, that light would go out forever. After school, Manny stopped by her friend's house. They drank tea, listened to music, discussed the latest news, and laughed. Manny talked about her plans to go to university. She wanted to study design or art. She dreamed of moving to New York, but said that my mom probably won't let me go. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. She was lively, sincere, and genuine.
The pictures that are depicted on the screen are of 2 members of our community, a mom and a daughter.
By evening, Manny had returned home. At 8:30 p.m., a neighbor saw the lights come on in the windows. Robin had already returned from work and was preparing dinner. The house was filled with sounds, the TV, music, quiet conversation. Everything was normal, peaceful, like in hundreds of other homes that evening. At approximately 9:45 p.m., according to the investigation, a man approached the house. His silhouette was later captured by cameras in a neighboring yard. He stood at the gate, then walked around to the back and entered through the back door. The lock had not been broken. Perhaps the door had been left unlocked, or perhaps he knew how to get inside. Investigators have only partially reconstructed what happened next. First, Robin was attacked. She tried to defend herself, but the forces were unequal. Then Manny, who ran out of her room when she heard the noise, was attacked. It all lasted only a few minutes. After that, the house was plunged into dead silence. The criminal set the house on fire to cover his tracks. He poured flammable liquid in the living room and kitchen, threw a match, and left. The flames ignited instantly. Neighbors noticed smoke around midnight. They called the fire department, but the house was already engulfed in flames. When the firefighters broke through, there was no hope left. The bodies were found next to each other, mother and daughter together. It was as if, even in death, they were not separated. The next morning, the city learned of the tragedy. A mourning ribbon was hung at the school where Robin taught. Students brought flowers, notes, and toys. Teachers cried right in class. People wrote on social media, "We have lost kindness." For family and friends, it was not just grief, it was incomprehension. Robin and Manny never hurt anyone. Who could have entered their home, attacked them, and then set everything on fire, as if wanting to erase all traces of their lives? The police began their investigation immediately. The first thing they established was that this was not an accidental fire. The fire started in several places, which meant it was intentional. The killer acted in cold blood. Soon the investigation found its first clue: the family's missing car. The car was spotted a few hours after the fire. It was parked in a parking lot in a neighboring area, with burn marks on the floor mats. Inside the car were fingerprints, traces of blood, and a piece of fabric that looked like a jacket sleeve. This was the beginning of a long chain of evidence. By the evening of the same day, the police announced that a suspect was being sought, a man who had been seen near the scene of the crime. He was described as tall, with short hair, wearing dark clothes. He was walking, carrying a backpack. Several witnesses confidently claimed to have seen him around 11 p.m., when the fire had already started. For Charlesville, it was a shock. People who were used to peace and mutual trust suddenly realized that a murderer was walking among them. Candles burned at night, not only at the Aldridge home, but in windows throughout the city. Thus ended a day that had begun with the usual worries and plans. A day that was supposed to be just another page in their lives became their last. And for the town, it was the first in a history written in pain. The fire on Rugby Avenue initially appeared to be an accident, but in the first hours of the investigation, it became clear that the fire was only a cover. Investigators noticed traces of fuel spilled on the floor and characteristic burns on the bodies that did not match the causes of death. Experts quickly confirmed that the mother and daughter had died before the house caught fire. The news spread instantly. A chill swept through the city. This was not just a fire, it was murder. The streets, usually quiet, were now swarming with police, reporters, and journalists. People approached the cordon, asked questions, and cried. The air was thick with a mixture of smoke and fear. Investigators carefully examined the crime scene. Almost immediately, they found an important detail: a male shoe print on the floor near the entrance. Next to it was a palm print. In the kitchen, there was broken glass and drops of blood that did not belong to the victims. This meant that the perpetrator had injured himself. The next step was to search for the family's car. It was not in the garage or nearby. A few hours later, the police found the car in a neighboring area near a vacant lot. The car was parked with the door open and the interior was in disarray. Documents had been pulled out. There were traces of blood on the seat and an empty canister. The fingerprints matched those found in the house. Now the investigation had a lead. The police began checking recent incidents in the area: break-ins, assaults, thefts, and they found a match. A few days earlier, a man had been arrested for attempting to steal a car. He was released due to lack of evidence. His name appeared in the database, and now it sounded different. He turned out to be 30-year-old Gino Waters, a local resident with a criminal past. Several convictions, drug problems, outbursts of aggression. He lived not far from the Aldridge house, and according to neighbors, often roamed the neighborhood at night. The police quickly set up surveillance. Waters was arrested 2 days after the fire when he tried to leave town. Burns and fresh wounds were found on his body. The items seized during the search became crucial evidence: gloves with bloodstains, a lighter, a piece of fabric that matched a scrap found in the car. During questioning, he denied his guilt. He said that he didn't remember and that he just happened to be nearby. But everything pointed to his guilt: fingerprints, blood, shoe prints, witness statements. One of the neighbors confidently said that he saw him near the Aldridge house on the night of the tragedy. The investigation reconstructed the events of that night. According to the police, Waters tried to rob the house. He probably thought no one was inside. But when he encountered Robin, he got scared, hit her, and then hit Manny, who ran out to investigate the noise. After that, in a panic, he decided to set the house on fire to cover his tracks. This version explained everything: the chaos, the traces of fuel, the stolen car. But there was still something that could not be explained. How could someone strike defenseless people so many times? Investigators spoke of a fit of rage, but family and friends could not believe it. For them, it wasn't just a mistake by a criminal, it was an atrocity. Meanwhile, the town waited for the truth. People brought flowers, stood silently in front of the burned-down house. Every day, new notes appeared there, words of support, promises, prayers. Robin's teachers came with their classes, and the students held each other's hands. The police confirmed the arrest, and the suspect's name was made public. The public reacted violently, not with anger, but with silence. It seemed as if the entire town of Charlesville was unable to express its pain. The killer, a man from their street, had robbed the town of its sense of security. For investigators, the case was a matter of honor. They worked day and night to piece everything together. By March 2015, the evidence was ready, and the prosecutor's office announced that Gino Waters was charged with double murder, arson, and car theft. When the news broke, people lit candles at the burned-down house. Someone wrote on a sign nailed to a tree with a marker, "Now we know. Now let her rest." But for the family, this was not the end, but only the beginning of a new phase, waiting for the trial, the proceedings, reliving everything all over again. The city continued to live, but the fire of that night did not fade from people's hearts. It left a scar, a reminder of two women who simply lived, laughed, and dreamed, and of a man who decided he could take that away.
Monty and her mother lived at 1627 Rugby Avenue. We were called to that residence shortly after midnight by the Charlottesville Fire Department. I'm joined here with Chief Warner this morning as well.
After Gino Waters' arrest, the Charlesville police began one of the most intense investigations in recent years. There was no direct evidence against him, but all the clues converged like lines on a map to a single point: him. Investigators collected dozens of hours of video footage, fingerprints, biological traces, and witness statements. During questioning, Waters behaved unpredictably. At first, he was aggressive, then calm, as if everything that was happening did not concern him. He denied involvement, saying that he did not remember anything about that night. Experts confirmed that he was under the influence of drugs, but was conscious and understood what he was doing. The police established that a few hours before the crime, he had been wandering around the neighborhood, trying to enter several houses. The doors were locked until he stumbled upon the Aldridge house. Apparently, he knew that only two women lived there. Investigators called this choice not accidental. Photos of houses in the area taken the day before the tragedy were found on his phone. This proved that he had been scouting the location in advance. Experts also found particles of charcoal and ash on Waters' shoes that were identical to those found in the Aldridge home. Everything fit together into a single picture. The investigation proceeded quickly, but was emotionally difficult. Officers who worked at the crime scene said they had trouble sleeping for a long time afterward. One of them admitted, "We've seen a lot. But when you find a mother and daughter lying next to each other and realize that someone did this for a trifle, you can't forget it." The trial began in the summer of 2015. The courtroom was silent. On one side were the victim's family, friends, teachers, and students. On the other was Gino Waters, dressed in a gray prison uniform, emotionless, his eyes downcast. The prosecution presented the case in detail, almost minute by minute. They showed photographs, camera recordings, traces of blood found in his home, and DNA test results. The blood on his jacket matched Robin Aldridge's samples. This became key evidence. The lawyer tried to argue that the defendant was not aware of his actions due to drug intoxication, but the court did not accept this line of defense. The prosecutor said, "This is not an accident or insanity. It is a choice. He entered a house where the lights were on, where two women lived, and decided he could take everything from them." The witness testimony was difficult to hear. Neighbors recalled seeing a man walking down the street, seemingly in a hurry, with something resembling a canister in his hand. Firefighters recounted how they discovered the bodies. Relatives spoke about Robin and Manny, about what they were like. Many cried during the questioning. Psychologists called to testify described Waters as a man with a long history of addiction and aggression. He had fits of rage, lost control, but always acted rationally after the outburst. The court concluded that he understood the consequences of his actions and deliberately set fire to the house to destroy the evidence. When the jury went out to deliberate, the courtroom was deathly silent. 2 hours later, they returned. The verdict was clear: guilty on all counts: double murder, arson, and car theft. When the sentence was read, Gino Waters' face did not change. He just looked out the window as if it did not concern him. The judge said, "You committed a crime that cannot be explained by poverty, addiction, or despair. You took 2 lives full of goodness. You burned down a house thinking you would burn down the truth, but the truth came out anyway." The sentence: 2 life sentences. This was no relief to the family. Robin's mother, an elderly woman with gray hair, stood at the exit and said quietly, "I don't feel any joy. I just know that they are at peace now." After the trial in Charlottesville, people gathered again. A small memorial was built on the site of the burned house. Flowers, ribbons, photographs. Where the kitchen once stood, there's now a flower bed with lavender and a plaque that reads, "Love is stronger than fire." For the police, this case became personal. It reminded everyone that behind the dry lines of reports are real lives. People who just wanted to spend the evening at home, unaware that their last night had already begun. Gino Waters was not a man in the shadows. Many people knew him. Born and raised in Charlottesville, he spent most of his life between petty crimes and attempts to start over. In his youth, he played sports and dreamed of going to college, but gradually became mired in addiction. Alcohol, drugs, street gangs, all this became his normal reality. His first arrest was at the age of 20 for theft, then for assault. Each time he was released, he promised to start a new life. Each time he returned to the streets. Over time, he became a person whom even his relatives stopped believing. His loved ones said that he was quick-tempered, with sharp mood swings, but always knew how to appear polite and calm when it was to his advantage. In the year of the murder, he lived alone, without a steady job. He spent his nights wandering around the city. Sometimes he worked odd jobs, sometimes he stayed with friends. A week before the tragedy, he was evicted from his apartment for debts. He was angry and desperate. The investigation concluded that the crime was not specifically targeted at the Aldridge family. He simply chose an easy target. The house was a little out of the way, surrounded by silence, with no surveillance cameras. He wanted to steal, quickly without making a sound. But when he stumbled upon the owners, fear and rage took over. Psychiatrists who examined his condition described him as a personality type prone to impulsive aggression. He had no control over his emotions, especially when intoxicated, and harbored a deep hatred for those he considered more successful. Robin and Manny symbolized what he never had: stability, love, respect. In his distorted perception, he saw this as a challenge. When Robin probably tried to stop him, he snapped. The attack was instantaneous and merciless. Then came the realization. He saw what he had done and decided to set the house on fire to destroy the evidence. The investigation would call this step not a crime of desperation, but an attempt to erase guilt. In court, psychologists said, he feels no empathy. For him, people are obstacles. After the murder, he felt no remorse, only fear of being caught. Indeed, Waters' behavior after the crime appeared cold-blooded. He stole a car, drove away, hid his clothes, and burned some of his belongings. Even when he realized that the police were on his trail, he did not try to run far, he just waited. The officers who questioned him noted his strange calmness. One of them said, "He talked about everything except the crime itself, as if it had nothing to do with him, no emotions, no anger, no regret." Court documents described him as a person who had lost the boundaries between good and evil. His motive was not only robbery, but also a sudden outburst of anger, a mixture of rage, fear, and senseless violence. When the prosecutor read the verdict, he said, "He did not kill for profit. He killed because he couldn't contain the destruction he carried within him." After the verdict, some tried to find an explanation. Maybe addiction, poverty, hopelessness. But for those who knew Robin and Manny, there were no excuses. Their lives were worth more than all his excuses combined. Waters' psychological profile became a topic of discussion in universities and conferences. His case was cited as an example of how society often fails to notice when an ordinary person becomes a threat, not because of madness, but because of indifference. He was someone everyone avoided, but no one perceived as dangerous, and that is what made him invisible until it was too late. At one of the final hearings, the judge said, "You destroyed two good people who never did you any harm. This is not anger, it is emptiness that kills." These words became a definition not only of the crime, but also of Waters himself, a man in whom only emptiness remained. The trial of Gino Waters was the final chapter in a case that had paralyzed Charlottesville for many months. When the judge announced the sentence, 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, the courtroom fell silent. No one was happy. The victims' families held hands, staring at the floor. Robin's father said only one thing: "Now all that remains is to remember." At that moment, the city seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Not out of relief, but out of understanding. Justice does not bring back life. After the trial, residents gathered at the very spot where their house once stood. On the ground where the threshold had once been, they placed 2 white candles and a plaque with the inscription, "Love is stronger than fire." Robin's students brought drawings, and Manny's friends brought flowers and dance ribbons. No one spoke aloud, but everyone felt the same thing. They must continue to live as these women had taught them, with kindness and light. The story of Robin and Manny became a reminder. Evil does not always come with loud words. Sometimes it walks quietly down the same streets until it decides to enter a house. And the only thing that can resist it is human connection, attention, the ability not to pass by those who fall. Today in Charlottesville, their names are borne by a school scholarship in a small park. Every summer, a memorial evening is held there. Candles, music, silence. People come not just to mourn, but to give thanks. The flames of that night have gone out, but the light they left behind remains. And perhaps it is this light that prevents darkness from winning completely.